Oh, where's the camera?
Hello, Marcia.
Hello.
Hello, Katina.
Hello, how are you all?
We're fine.
Fine.
Good.
And I don't know what's happened to my camera, but I'm here.
We can't see you.
Oh, do you see me?
No, we
No.
cannot see you.
Oh, okay. Well, let's see. It must be unplugged somewhere.
Barb won't be here tonight.
What's that?
And Barb won't be here tonight.
Oh, shoot.
She got an emergency phone call. She's been called in to preach on Sunday without any warning.
Oh, gosh.
That's 3 days.
So she's not happy.
I got a call from Ann Myers the other night asking me about women in the church.
Oh, she did, huh?
She mentioned you, Bill.
Well, good. We had known each other since college.
Yeah, she told me what a fine guy you were.
Yeah. Yeah, she and I both went to East Tennessee State. So she was there at the same time I was.
Yeah, that's
And
what
we
she
were in seminary. And the thing was, we were in seminary together too.
Yeah, that's what she said.
Probably one of my oldest friends.
Well, she's trying to get the women at Powell involved in the PCUSA Women of the Church again.
Oh,
She's our cluster leader.
okay. So she does more work that way with stuff there. I don't see how she finds time to do all of the stuff she does. So, she's on Knox Justice. She's doing that. She's on the Peacemaking Committee. She goes to Oak Ridge once a week and protests out in front of the power plant out there. I don't see how she keeps up doing it all. Plus working part-time, even though she's supposed to be retired. You know what that's like,
pastors don't retire.
You know what that's like, don't you, Katina?
Well, I heard
Tempted to retire.
tonight that there is no retirement for Christians.
Yes.
Hey, you watched the video, huh?
We did.
I tried to watch it. Every time it kept glitching, it would stop in the middle of it. I
hate
tried
that.
3 different times and still couldn't get it to play.
Huh.
So I went and read the book instead.
Which is probably better. You probably got a more thorough introduction to this.
Oh, the only problem is I took 10 pages worth of notes.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
So tonight's class is led by Bill.
A little note paper like this for the video.
Well, that's what mine were originally until I typed them all up, and it came out to be about 10 pages.
Wow. Well, I am going to start us off. I think it's 6:34. I don't know if anyone else is going to join us or not, but I'm going to start us off with a meditation that it may be in the books, Bill, so you may have already read this. I don't know. I don't have the book, so I'm working off of the Leader's Guide. But this is a meditation that the Leader's Guide offered, which I thought was a really nice introduction into the lesson. So I'm going to start us off with this. If you make room for me, I will come in. Stretch yourself, breathe. Grace yourself, breathe. Reach out, beloved, unfold your arms and let me move between them. I will make my home and you will be my living room. I'll call in more of myself and continue to alter this space so that you can bear this world and even more, embrace it with me. It's through your arms that I will cradle nurslings and the dying, Pound drums with the thriving, support the barely surviving. Yes, with open arms, we will receive joy and mourning. We'll clean up, stall out, and fight on. We'll lift and let down, be vulnerable and strong with these two very human arms. These lanky, expressive tools of the trade will embrace again and again. So I bless your hands to act as my own, to connect as me, to love through me. You feel inadequate at times. You have a direct view of your insufficiency, your wounds, your hidden mess. Don't take your eyes off of me. I am still breathing, thinking, creating, pondering new ways to impart love and grace to you, through us. It's you and me. So share us, touch them, pass me on, love who I love, and give what I give. Because I tell you truly, the more of the lost you come to know, the more found you become. The more of you that is me will have found the part of me that is them. Oh, and how I love them and how I love you. Trust me, my love. Your arms, though small, can bear this world. I am the strength within them. Was that in the book, Bill? Have you?
The first part of it is, the last half of it was not, but the first part was. So that's really neat. I like the ending.
Yes, I thought that was beautiful. And it reminds me of the words I often quote of Teresa of Avila, that Christ has no arms in this world but our own, no feet but our own. And that's where that took me, was to that quote.
And he even talks about that at the end of the book, at the end of the chapter on this. Says, you know, I'm reminded of the very words of Teresa of Avila. He has no hands but ours, no feet but ours, no eyes but ours, no ears but ours. So, and that justice always, justice is Martin Luther King's quote about justice.
I have it marked.
Mark my bullet toward your chest.
Yes, always. So both of those are at the very end of the chapter.
Well, what did you think of the video? How did this one sit with you?
Well, as much as I saw it, I liked it. So.
Yeah, you didn't get to see much, but you can talk about the chapter too.
Yeah.
I guess I was reminded, one step at a time. Just keep on keeping on. You don't know what's at the end of the path, but it doesn't really matter.
It's not your responsibility.
Not my
It's
responsibility.
God's responsibility. Yeah, I like the idea of the journey which he presented in the video very much. I didn't like the timing of the book though.
You don't like the timing of it? In what way?
Oh, he has it written in the 80s.
Oh, yeah. I questioned that one too. I wasn't sure about that. It didn't fit with what I had been, taught when I was in seminary.
No, it's a little at odds with what
I think he's about 10, 15 years off on that one.
But no, it goes along with his interpretation of what he's trying to present. Though.
Yes.
Yeah. And the fact that the temple was already destroyed and,
But that's not mentioned anywhere in this highly historical book.
Hey, Jonathan.
Hello, Jonathan.
Hello,
Welcome.
Phil. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Was I late? I'm always late.
Just a few minutes. We're just getting started. We were talking about our initial reactions to this week's video.
He likes history.
Yes. I find his little historical nuggets to be very helpful. I'm not great with history. I'm really good with church history, but not so much the ancient history. So I like to be reminded what's happening in the world when this is taking place.
Right. Yeah.
And we tend to focus on Western history, don't tend to look at what's going on in the Middle East and that area of the world where all of our history tends to focus on Christianity in the West. and what has happened there, through the with the Roman Catholic Church, the Reformation, and after all of it, and whatever, and what has happened once it came to this country. And so we haven't looked at the history of the Gospels before that. And I think he does a pretty good job of painting that. But as you said a minute ago, the dating of his dating was in the 80s. I think it's about 15 years earlier. That's just from my own study and what I learned when I was in seminary anyway.
Right.
Oh, when the gospel was written was earlier than he said.
Yes.
Later. He said
it was written in the 80s. I thought it was like more like 65. So I don't know. I know Mark was probably written sometime in the 40s, just prior to the temple falling. So
at the very beginning, he talked about what he called the divorce between Judaism and what we now know of as Christianity. And I'll be honest, I have never really given this a lot of thought. I think I knew, we referred to the early Judeo-Christians, and we talk about, the Jewish Christians and so forth. But I had never really given much thought as to what exactly, finally put the wedge between the two. What do you think about that? To think about it being a divorce?
Well, in some ways, I guess it's true that it was a divorce. They went their separate ways. They couldn't live together anymore as one body. One had felt one way and another felt the other way, and one felt threatened by the other.
Mm-hmm.
He even talks about that. The Pharisees and so on felt threatened by the he called them the Christus, the Christians, and so they began a pogrom against those.
Well, it's interesting that it all revolved around the need to bring people back to rebuild the temple.
Right.
And I guess there was a hope that it would be similar to after the exile in Babylon,
right,
that we read about in Ezra and Nehemiah. And it sounded about the same.
And that had been, I think that was what was going on in the early days after the temple fell, and as they moved into the diaspora. In fact, that's been the whole point of establishing the state of Israel, even in the 1940s. The idea was eventually to rebuild the temple. And they said that's when the real Messiah will come, that's when the temple is rebuilt. That's the Zionist theories anyway.
There's something else that struck me. That through that, Christianity lost its status as a sanctioned religion in the Roman Empire, which I didn't realize how big a deal that was.
Yeah. Well, because it was still connected to Judaism, so therefore it would have been it would have had that ability to connect with them. It was considered to be a sect of Judaism. Judaism was a protected sect in the Roman Empire. Even though Nero wanted to get rid of them, both the Christians and the Jews, because he saw both as competition to his own power and so on. That's essentially how Pilate approached the issue, particularly in the Gospel of Luke, that he saw Jesus as a threat to his own power, as did Herod. So when we come to the end, he goes before Pilate, and then Pilate sends him to Herod, and he doesn't get the answers he wants, so he sends him back to Pilate, and Pilate realizes, I have to do something, and probably the best thing is to get rid of him because he's a threat to the empire, to the status quo. That's my interpretation of what happens anyway.
Well, and he talked about the threat to the empire, and I highlighted the 4 threats that he mentioned. Do you remember what those were? The first threat was that Christianity says that we choose the awareness that all our brothers and sisters, that we are
Right.
all God's people,
Right.
all being the really important thing. The second threat was women, that we're going to treat women as not equals yet, but we're getting there. We're moving in that direction of treating women. The third was to treat slaves with respect as human beings, not even, he said it was less than property, it was like animal status. And the fourth being that we take care of the poor and the ill and the widowed and the outcast. And I thought to myself as I highlighted these, well, isn't it good that we took care of those four things in the first century and we don't have to worry about it anymore, right?
Right.
That's why we're still on the same journey.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, as I highlighted them, I thought those are the four things we're still fighting about. I mean, really, aren't we?
Yes.
We're still fighting about who's in and who's out. We're fighting about equal rights for women, and we don't have slaves anymore. But we're, the world is in unrest about the group of people who grew up out of slavery, and then the sick and the impoverished and the widowed and the outcast. This is still what we're fighting about. This is still
Yes, it is.
Well, and he makes the point in the book when he talks about the Beatitudes, because Luke's Beatitudes are quite different from the ones that are in the book of Matthew. And there's the balance between the good and the bad in terms of that. And then he goes on the attack of all of those who, yes, they call themselves so-called Christos or Christians, but do they use their wealth in the right way? Do they use their power in their right way? Do they show their love in the right way by taking care of the people that they're supposed to take care of? Because that's what they have agreed to do as they became a part of the community. And there was must have been some kind of struggle going on either both in Antioch and probably in Ephesus too, of welcoming like the slaves and women into the community. I could see that could really create some tension. It still does to a certain extent today, creates tension of welcoming people who are different from us into the community of faith. So I'm trying to decipher my handwritten notes here.
So he says that the overarching theme of Luke is that the justice of Jesus Christ cannot be killed, that it can be contained for a time, at which point it will burst forth, and that it will always prevail. Do you think
Yes.
that is true? Do you agree with that
Yes.
message?
I hope so.
Well,
The 20
in 2020, I don't know yet.
This might be one of those years where it's taking a pause, huh? Where it's being contained for a time.
In some circles, I think it's we're taking a pause.
I was reading The Power of Myth again today by Joseph Campbell, and he talks about that anytime there's significant change in a civilization, there is going to be terror, there's going to be pain, there's going to be strife, and there's going to be warfare. And it comes in different stripes and different colors depending on the intensity of what's happening. And he says it's periodic. If you look at the history of the world, you see it in almost every major civilization, that some kind of chaos has created and that brings about a change in that civilization as they take the step forward. I think that's what he's trying to get at here with what's going on with people, with the Jews and the Jewish Christians. There is a change coming, and people are fighting that change. They are resisting that change. And so, Jonathan left.
Oh,
Do you sense that we are in that pattern still today?
Yes, I think so.
well, we're always in a time of change. We lived through the 60s. We were in a time of change then.
Well, look at what went through with the Depression and then World War I,
For us.
World War II.
Right.
The Depression, World War II, and then after that came what was the next? Vietnam, Korea, and the changes that were going on there, and the changes that came as a result of Vietnam, and all of that. And then after that, what came next? Then comes the Gulf. The changes that are coming as the economic situations began to change. Change always creates chaos.
And in this fourth path, we recognize the chaos has already been stirred up. So what's the purpose of the fourth path? What did you all glean from that? What are we to do now that the chaos has been stirred up? What do we do?
Hold on to what you've been taught as you've gone through the different paths, as you move to each of the paths. And if it takes you have to stop and abide within that for a period of time, and then you'll find the way to move as you move forward in the path. And he says, eventually, love always wins. He makes that comment 3 or 4 times throughout the book, that love always wins. As long as we continue to hold love as the root and the foundation of everything that we do, love will always win.
And
I
like
get
God,
the impression that we can't really do a whole lot, but the little things matter.
Yes, they do.
Right.
Marcia, you were going to add something?
I was going to say that, he said to let God take care of the big stuff and we take care of the little stuff. One day at a time, one foot in front of the other, do the best you can that day and rest.
He says, pick up your cross
More.
daily.
Have some
Pick up your
joy.
cross daily, but always keep the joy in your mind as you move forward, as you share that joy and that love with others. He says that over and over and over again.
Yeah, he had a lot of messages about put the cross down sometimes, rest, and then he talked about joy, but he didn't link the two together. Did you get the sense that where I kind of put it together was that rest is the time when we're to experience joy, when we're to rejoice in what we have built up, but he didn't specifically touch on that, what the rest looks like. What does that look like to you? That time of rest, putting your cross down.
It's where you
Taking a break
contemplate.
from session.
Everything we've been doing recently has been that rest.
Well, and this whole time it's going to be, people are using this time to do different things and finding those moments of joy in the midst of the chaos, those things that they enjoy doing. He talks about, there's one point in the book, he talks about we need to reclaim that creative side of ourselves and letting that creativity and how we can interact with each other through that creativity and so on. So that, I think that's how the joy comes, is you find the things that you enjoy doing and then share those with someone else. Say, here, this is something, maybe this will make you feel better. This will help you. Like if you like to cook somebody a meal and take it to them. If you like to do pictures, draw pictures or paint a painting, give it to them as a gift. Something that will show that you do care about them in some way or another.
So what brings you all joy? Not just fleeting happiness, but deep joy.
Well, for me yesterday, it was talking to my grandson, and he actually talked to me for the first time in complete sentences.
Wow.
In complete sentences. And that was just, he actually said grandpa for the first time. It's always ha ha. And yesterday it was grandpa. It's your grandpa. And I said, yes, I'm grandpa. He says, you're Grandpa Bill. I said, yes, I'm Grandpa Bill. And he has always ever been able to do is say pa, because his ability to speak has been very limited because of the injuries that he sustained. And when I heard that, I almost broke into tears. I was so happy. I was so filled with joy. He's actually beginning to progress. And the changes are coming, and they're getting there slowly but surely. He's actually starting to walk. Pete Sam said he's walking with assistance. He doesn't have to have the walker, as long as one of us stands behind him and holds. How we walk behind the children, holding their hands as they walk in front of us. He's been doing that. Before, he couldn't even stand on his own 2 legs and be able to do that. So.
It's interesting that what brings you joy is the fruit of these paths that have come. It's so much chaos and so much turmoil and so much storm. And then seeing some of that break open brings you joy. And I'm not surprised. That's a wonderful, I think that often when we come through our storms on the other side, we're more able to appreciate the joy. I think every grandparent loves to hear their grandchild speak for the first time, but when it's a true accomplishment, I think it has that much more sweetness to it.
Yeah, because originally they said he probably would never be able to speak, you know, because of the injuries that he sustained. Wouldn't be able to hear or be able to see. He can see, he can hear. They said he would never be able to walk. He's now walking. They said he would never be able to talk. He's now talking. You know, and that's 3 years. Well, he's 4 now, and that happened when he was 6 months old. The injury happened.
What happened to him, Bill?
It's kind of hard to describe. He suffered the baby abuse syndrome.
Shaken baby.
Yeah, shaken baby syndrome.
Shaken baby, wow.
Oh,
Shaken baby. His grandmother, Genevieve's mother, was taking care of him, and he was being a typical 6-month-old. And she got very frustrated with him, and she got upset with him, and she tossed him on the bed. You know, sometimes like we do when we're frustrated with a child, we might just toss him on the bed. Didn't think anything about it. 2 days later, he started having severe seizures. And they rushed him to the hospital and found that he had severe brain injuries. And the only way he could have had those injuries was as a result of shaken baby. And there was investigation started. Sam and Jen were barred from even coming to the hospital to see him, being in the same room with him for almost 3 weeks. They were investigating everyone, and they were about ready to arrest Sam, and the grandmother stepped forward and said, "I was the one who caused the problem." And she explained what happened. And she's now in jail. They have a very severe child abuse law in Colorado. She was sentenced to 15 years in prison.
oh my goodness.
Yeah, and so on. But he was in the hospital. That happened on November the 6th, and he came home on December 24th.
My goodness.
So yeah, he was in the neonatal unit at Denver Neurological Center, a children's hospital, for that length of time. So it was a rough time for him. The second 6 months of his life were really rough, and really rough on Sam and Jen as a result of that. In fact, I didn't get to see him until almost a year later, after all of that happened. If it hadn't been for New Hope, I wouldn't have been able to go at all. So they took up the money and sent me.
Gosh.
So just seeing all of that and seeing them be able to come through that chaos, that terror that they felt, and seeing all of that just brought a great deal of joy. I was just so happy, and it made all the difference in the world to me to actually see that. And it's been a while, so never knew what were going to happen next from one day to the next with him. So.
Well, that's true of any of us, you know. You don't know what the next day will bring.
Yep. And we don't have to worry about the next day. Just know that we are cared for and that we are loved and that we have the capacity to love the same. I think that's the ultimate message that all 4 of the paths are trying to tell us, that we all have the capacity to love already within us. We're born with it. And we have to learn how to nurture it and to share it. And I think that's what he talks about in this particular section. Is mature. How do we share what we've learned on this so-called road that we're on? That's the other image that got me. He kept talking about we're on a road. And that's the whole point of Luke's gospel. Jesus is on the road. From the time he leaves Galilee till he goes to Jerusalem, he's always on the road. Every incident happens while he's on the road on his way to Jerusalem. And then at the end, it's on his way to meeting them again in Galilee. He's on the road. He meets them in Emmaus. You know, and he's on the road to Emmaus. It's always on the road that we find the truth for ourselves, and our hearts are open to that truth as we watch the stories, experience the stories, and experience our own life as we travel the road. That was the one thing that struck me about this particular gospel, that I never thought to think about it. It's always about being on the road.
One of the comparisons he made in this study was the angel Gabriel appears to Zechariah saying, "You're going to have a baby," and then also to Mary, "You're going to have a baby," and had two very different reactions. I thought it was interesting that I highlighted the quote. He said to Zechariah, he didn't say this, but this is the idea, "I'm going to still your tongue until this event has already come to pass." And I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if that really happened? If God would still our tongues. How often have we gotten ahead of ourselves and spoken before we really understood?
All the time.
Guilty.
I was
In
always
some ways,
taught
I
put your
think
brain in
Zechariah
gear.
was very lucky.
Our problem was, you don't always put our brain in gear before we open our mouths.
Oh,
Absolutely.
oh gosh.
Absolutely. But Mary had a very different reaction, and this is her reaction. Feel free to move the little box over if you cannot. This is what is often called the Magnificat, which is Mary speaking to Elizabeth about the news that she has received. So listen to the word of God here. "And Mary said, 'My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior, for he has looked with favor on the lowliness of his servant. Surely from now on all generations will call me blessed, for the Mighty One has done great things for me, and holy is his name. His mercy is for those who fear him from generation to generation. He has shown strength with his arm. He has scattered the proud in the thoughts of their hearts. He has brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty. He has helped his servant Israel in remembrance of his mercy, according to the promise he made to our ancestors, to Abraham and to his descendants forever.' And Mary remained with her about 3 months and then returned to her home." Now, what
It's
is
one of my
it?
favorite passages.
Isn't it beautiful? It's
Yep.
absolutely stunning. So what did Mary do differently? Why did her tongue not have to be stilled?
He was a demure child, and Zechariah was a planning old man.
Okay, so there may have been life experiences that played in, sure.
And guys always have to figure things out, you know.
And gender differences, yes. Assuming, Zechariah's tongue got stilled, and Mary's passage has been lifted up as something, beautiful we reflect on every Advent. So what can we learn from Mary's reaction?
Go back to the old saw that we hear all the time: let go and let God.
Well, God has acted in the past, and he will act in the future.
Yes.
Mary's talking like it's all already happened.
Isn't it interesting? Yeah, she sings this song as though she's got
That's
this
true.
baby in her arms, but she does
Yes.
not.
Well, she's claiming the vision.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that what he wants us to do is to claim the vision that God has given to us as we move along the path. It has to become a part of us as we move forward, and so on. And I think that, and she does do that. She places her trust ultimately in God to handle the situation. It may be out of her control, but she trusts that God will take care of her in the end.
The word I wrote on my notes in big letters was surrender. That word really, it just really echoed with me today. That as I was reading that, I thought that it's a perfect example of surrender. Really, she wasn't given a lot of choice. She said, "I will do it," but if she didn't, you know, it was already done, right? With, you know, she wasn't.
Hard to take it back.
Right. She wasn't given a lot of choice in the matter. But the way that she has surrendered to it and claimed it as part of how she participates in the salvation of humanity is just incredible, especially considering her age, that
Right.
it's a child saying these things. Does it feel good to be asked to surrender to God's will?
It's scary.
Mm-hmm.
It really is scary.
Or our human nature, I think, is to be in control. And when we're in control, we don't make room for God. We think we know everything. And we know so little.
Yeah, I liked his analogy of putting down the cross. And I think so often we are just determined, I'm going to carry this thing all the way, and we trip over it and get tangled up in it. And I thought, if we could surrender, put it down, breathe a minute, and then pick it back up, how much more effective could we be in our calling?
Mm-hmm.
But you're right, we don't like to be out of control, not even for a minute.
I think that's why pastors deserve sabbaticals and time for themselves. None of us should call the pastor on their day off.
Oh, yeah. That's never going to happen.
Well, it should.
It also
funny.
affects you when you're going on sabbatical too.
And I actually don't tremendously mind when people call, but the first thing people always say when they call is, "I know it's your day off, but."
But
I really don't mind receiving calls on my day off, because it feels good to me that we're connected in that way. But you're right, everybody does need Sabbath rest from time to time.
I've even been called when I was on vacation to come back and do a funeral.
Oh dear.
And I told them, no, call the other Presbyterian minister in town and have them do it. You know, I'm sure they'd be willing to step in. There was a minister who lived 10 miles away. You know, I'm sure, and we'd always done things together between the two churches. I was not going to try 450 miles to do a funeral. You know, I'm sorry, I'm on vacation. Or we can wait until I come back and we can do a memorial service when I get back. You know, go ahead and do an interment, and then we'll do a memorial service. Well, they opted to do the memorial service, so that way I was there and be able to do it. But it was, you know, I've had people actually call me on vacation and say, somebody's in the hospital, you need to go see them. And sometimes I'm not even in town.
We forget sometimes that we are all ministers of the word, not just pastor. And I think Presbyterians do a pretty good job of empowering the people, more than a lot of denominations. But we as pastors probably should do a better job of reminding the congregation that you are ministers as well. So, we're under a minute. Let me pray with you all.
Okay.
Holy One, we give you thanks for meeting us where we are, for coming into our individual homes and breathing your spirit into us. And God, we give you thanks for the permission, in fact, the command to take a Sabbath rest. And so, God, we ask that you would help us to do just that, but that you would help us to rest and rest well, and to find